Hello, this is Adam from the Astro Imaging channel. This is week 3 of what we're doing here, which so far we've gone over Hytham's processing and pixinsight, a little bit on calibration frames last week, a little bit on Deep Sky Stacker, Photoshop, and this week I'm going to kind of continue what I did last week in Photoshop, except I'm going to do it in pixinsight. So you'll get a little bit of an idea of how pixinsight compares and contrasts to Photoshop. Last week I used RGB data. This week I'm using I'm using data from my monochromatic camera, so the channels are separated. I'm still going to do that just so you see the process of doing that, but I'll tell you at the point when I kind of change over to just having the channels combined in one of the few steps, and from there that's just like processing a file with even a DSLR camera. I'm also going to go over some calibrating and stacking in pixinsight, which we used Deep Sky Stacker for last week. But without much else, what I'm going to do is jump right in. And anybody out there, if you cannot see the screen that I'm working on, just tell me, because sometimes I have to flip to a different type of screen, and I know it's gone crazy right now, but it should be fixed right there. If it's not, tell me. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going.
The way to tell is to go ahead and type something into group chat or Q&A if you're using that method. So because otherwise you're probably going to be muted, or you're coming in such a way that you aren't actually part of the open conversation here. So if you're not seeing what looks like a pixinsight screen right now, please go ahead and type something into group chat.
Thanks, Alex.
Go ahead.
Okay. So like I said, last week we went over what calibration frames are and Deep Sky Stacker. And I was talking a little bit about how, first of all, pixinsight has a terrible reputation for being complicated. And it is complicated. Anything that's as full-featured as pixinsight is going to be complicated because there are so many settings that go across all different ranges that to be able to give you what you want, it needs to be complicated. You don't need to learn everything in pixinsight. You just need to figure out certain tools. And as you go, you're going to put certain tools together. And one thing I noticed as I was going through pixinsight is the routine, with the exception of those certain tools that you're going to do to tweak here and tweak there depending on the image. The routine in general is fairly straightforward, and you kind of do the same things with every image. So tonight I'm going to do that. I'm going to do the few same things with this image that that you're pretty much going to do to every image. The image I've selected is one that I haven't had a great amount of luck processing. So I don't really care if it doesn't look great at the end. There are a bunch of things that I'm not going to have time to do that I would do otherwise. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump right in and kind of start and show you exactly what you're going to do every time, no matter what, if you're processing in pixinsight. Now, when you are stacking, you can manually take the calibration files and manually integrate them and star align all of your lights and then compile them all manually. And when I first got pixinsight, I thought I actually had to do that. But it turns out that right here under Script, Batch Processing, and Batch Pre-Processing, you click that and you get the Batch Pre-Processing script. Now, this is a very powerful tool for stacking and calibration. The pixinsight team, I don't know if they still don't recommend it, but they think you should be doing it manually because you have more control over everything. This is so simple, and it has so many tools to it that I don't quite understand that, and maybe they've come around at this point, but to me it's so simple. And I barely have to explain much to you, but bias frames. You go down to the bottom, you add your bias. I'm going to go through, and I actually have my bias right here. I saved it right there, and I know that that's the bias I use, master bias 2. Add darks. Now I'm going to go down, and my darks, from what I remember, I have my dark saved in this folder, and you're going to notice right here my dark is 1200 seconds. Now, in the past, I've told you that darks should be matched to the light, to your light frames in exposure time. That is true, but pixinsight actually scales your dark frames to your lights. And if your camera has a linear enough sensor, one where the noise grows in a predictable manner, then you can get away with using different exposure of your darks. They suggest using a longer dark still than your light, but you can use any exposure, and any longer exposure. Now flats. Flats are simple. I have my dark in there. We're going to add our flats. Now, oh, I forgot one thing. I am sorry. When you use a master bias, you have to click master bias over here. When you use a master dark, you have to click master dark over here. If you're for the first time stacking your darks together, your bias together, your flats together, you do not use the masters. You're creating masters in this process. Since you can reuse your bias, and since you can reuse your darks, I almost always use master bias and master darks. When it comes to flats, since you're probably not reusing them, or maybe you're only reusing them for a couple days, you're not using it as frequently. So I'm going to add my flats, and well, I'm not going to waste time going around this menu. Let's just pretend that I add my flats in there. Now, actually, no, I'm not. This is a pretty cool feature, so it's worth showing you. I just have to remember where my flats are for that particular target right here. Okay, I'm going to select all of my flats, and as you see, because Sequence Generator Pro puts the channel, the color channel, or the filter name, the filter type, in the file name and fits header, it actually automatically sorts the flats by color channel, which makes it a lot easier. See, it even saves the H alphas in there, and that's why I didn't say color, but either way. So you pretty much just select a bunch of frames and drop them in there, just like you do Deep Sky Stacker. Same thing with your lights. You add your lights, and you go in and I've reshot this a couple times, so I'm not quite sure where my files are. But when I select my lights, the lights are going to populate in there just like the flats did, and it's going to have the filters selected properly. And I just want to browse over it. And the next thing you want to do is go to registration reference image, and what you're going to do is you're going to select your light that's going to be your reference image, the image that you want to have the orientation or the particular field that you want to look at. So if your camera has drifted through the night and you're selecting a specific area, it'll select that frame as your reference. You can pick any of your frames as a kind of reminder to myself. I always try and pick my first red channel. Sometimes my first 5 or 6 red channels are test frames, samples, so I delete them all, and the first red channel in the folder is the one that I register on, so that I can kind of usually know which image I've registered on. Then you pick your output directory, which is typically, for me, which is typically the directory that I've acquired, that I have my images in. You have a few options here. Export calibration frames. So what that means, it actually exports, it gives you a directory of your calibration frames. And I'm actually not seeing, let me see. Because what it also does is it also exports registered images. And not quite sure why I'm not seeing that in here. I could have swore I saw that in here. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something. But either way, after you do that, if you want to, you can click Diagnostics.
I think you may need to put some lights in there so that it realizes it's got something to work with.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Maybe right now it's just planning on. Let me see. I know I have these. I think that's it. Kind of doesn't matter if it's it, but for my sake, I'll use it as a demonstration, and you'll see what I'm saying. So you put them in there; it automatically sorts them by channel, and yeah, I'm not sure, but either way, I think it may automatically do that, where it exports your individual lights, which have already had the darks, flats, and bias applied to them. I'm pretty sure you can turn that feature off if you want to. It does take up a lot of disk space if you do it every time. So you hit Diagnostics again. It tells you what you've missed. So I've missed this, and I'm going to take that R1. Now it doesn't matter that I'm picking the wrong frame. Don't even worry about it. Diagnostics isn't that smart that it knows that I'm picking the wrong, but you click that. When Diagnostics completed, it says OK. When it says Diagnostics completed OK, you can click Run. I'm not going to do that. It would take probably 20 minutes, depending on the number of lights, depending on also whether you're using masters. But you click Run, and it starts. It does prevent you then from doing anything else in pixinsight. In fact, having batch pre-processing script open prevents me from doing anything else in pixinsight, including going to click other images. So there are some limitations to having it open. You can't always, like, for me, what I'm always trying to do is I'm trying to remember a particular file name or see what a particular file looks like. So you can always jump out, go to it through a different program, but it becomes a little bit of a pain. That said, you could jump out of it. It asks you to do you really want to exit batch preprocessing script? That's why it asks you that, because if you click yes, those file lists are gone. If you click no, you still have your file list. So you've done all this and you forget your reference image or something, you have to jump out, you're sometimes frustrated. Let's pretend I clicked Run, and but I'm going to exit. Run, like I said, would take 10 minutes. Do we have any questions at this point?
There don't seem to be any questions coming in on the Q&A or the chat boxes.
Okay. So. Now, after I do that, what's going to happen is it's going to spit out some files. If you are stacking your bias, your darks, and your flats for the first time, and you're not using previously done masters, then it will put these in the same directory that you've selected previously. Otherwise, it'll only put the lights, which are named by default with this convention. Light filter, blue binning, 1. So it's pretty basic, pretty obvious, and it works. So I have these files opened right here, and as everybody knows, you get your initial files, and they're dim. There's barely anything to see. I will tile the windows so you can see, and I'll make them a little smaller. Just wondering, sorry for 1 second, I just want to, yeah, okay. Ignore what I just did there, because I'm going to explain it in 1 second. It's just that green channel looked really dim to me, which I guess is common. The green channel, seems to always be a little bit less data in that. Maybe it's my light pollution, and that's why I'm used to seeing it that way. So I've stacked my channels using the batch preprocessing script, and I've opened the 3 of them up. And as you can see, I have red, green, and blue. The first, if you want to look at the files, this is an important tool right here, the screen transfer function. You get to it by going to the Process Explorer, and it's going to be in your favorites. It's going to be in all processes as well, but you double-click it in your favorites, and you've got it right here. Even before I jump in, I might as well explain this tool, because this is your friend. This is the tool that you use to visualize all of your data when it's still linear. That's one of the differences between Photoshop and pixinsight. Pixinsight places a lot of importance on keeping your the integrity of your data while it's in a linear state, and they do a lot of specific things that for that reason. I'm not 100% certain why it's that important to keep it in a linear state, but it seems to work well for them. So when they're suggesting things, I'm listening. Whereas in Photoshop, you may be stretching pretty soon to almost immediately off the bat, or at least doing something so you can visualize your data. pixinsight gives you the screen transfer function. The screen transfer function changes the way your data is displayed without actually changing the image. So when I click, and I'll explain this in a second, but this is the auto stretch button right here. When I have my green channel selected and I click that, it automatically stretches it to show me what is in the image. It is not changing the data. It's just changing the way it's shown. And that's important because we are trying to keep that linear data. Now, I can go to each channel and perform the tool, and right at this point, all I'm really doing is to make sure that my calibration worked properly. Do any of my channels have dust donuts? I may see one, but I don't think it's going to become a huge problem. I'm making it really small now. I hope this is probably not helping you see it. I don't know. I was thinking for a second it might be helping you see it. But so there's no major issues with this data. Well, I shouldn't say that. You can see a major issue with this data that we're going to take care of later. Terrible gradient going across it. It's dark over here. It's light over here. Welcome to my red zone. That's what I deal with all the time. I wish I had a way around it. Actually, I do narrowband, but this is a galaxy. So the first thing I would do would be, after the screen transfer function to check on everything, would be the LRGB combination tool. Now, it probably doesn't matter but just for the sake of it, I'm going to reset these. You have to reset these before you do certain things. Most specifically, the histogram transfer, which I'll get into, but I don't think I needed to reset them for this, but better safe than sorry for the sake of doing this presentation, which I had done a dry run of this presentation meanwhile, and had all of this data set up on my computer, and I had all these tools spelled out in a really organized way, all lining the right side, all of my images files open, everything, and about an hour before I was doing this presentation, I closed the window, and I lost it all. So I'm doing it all over. So when it's processing, maybe I'll do some talking. But I'm back in the LRGB combination tool. The first thing you're going to do, and I jumped ahead, the first thing you're going to do, if your L channel is active and you don't want it to be because you don't have an L channel, you can deselect it. My R channel, I'm going to select from here. My R channel, red binning 1. If you have other channels open and other desktops, other images open and other desktops, this will show them, so you can work between desktops as an advantage. As a disadvantage, it gets a little confusing when you have when you're using all 4 desktops and you have about 20 files here, and the differences are binning 1, binning 1, 1, binning 1, 1, 1. It gets a little bit confusing, but for the most part, it's probably a benefit if you can keep them straight. So I'm going to go to my green channel, select it. I'm going to go to my blue channel, select it. It tries to automatically select the right channels. I don't know, for me it never gets them right. And what you're going to do is you're going to click right here, Apply Global. There will be certain times, these are confusing down here. These little 3 actions, or I don't even know what pixinsight calls them, but pretty much you're either applying it to an image, you're applying it to a new instance of an image, but in this case, with an LRGB combine, you're applying it globally because it's not being applied to any specific image. You want a new image out of it. So I click that, and it combines the LRGB channels more slowly than I was expecting, but it combined them. And here we go. Now I am, for the most part, done with these individual channels here. So I will, oh, I lost that. One of the things I've also realized with pixinsight is you have to be careful because you can lose your windows behind the toolbar at the top up here. So I've done my RGB, or excuse me, my RGB combination in the LRGB combination tool, and I can minimize that, and I'm done with it, so I can put it up here. Back to my dim image right here. I have not applied the screen transfer function to it, and that's why it's so dim. So I am going to click Auto Stretch. Whoa, a purple image. It's not always purple. Some people say blue, some people say green, but everyone has this problem when they use pixinsight, and it's one of those common things. When someone says, "Oh, I used pixinsight, my screen just went a crazy color," this is usually what it is. Once I use the screen transfer function, your channels are linked, so you are stretching the channels without changing the color weights of each channel. Again, this is only the way you're displaying it. It's not the actual image. So your image really isn't purple, but actually, right now your image is really purple, but the screen transfer function doesn't have to display it as a purple image. So what you want to do, your channels are linked right here. This little chain right here, you want to click it so that it's not highlighted and your channels are unlinked. And then when you go ahead and click the auto stretch, wow, a lot better. Not great because I have a crazy gradient and all this noise going through it, but okay. That unlinked channels, you can, I believe now, yeah, you can link them, and then you can perform any actions you want on this, and that will keep the channels linked. So you can pretty much change the luminance of the image without unbalancing the channels. Or you can go back, let me go back there, you can unlink them, and since they're still unlinked, you can change a channel at a time. So if you wanted to make this, the way the image is displayed, look good, even though it's just a temporary thing, you can. But this is a very, very short-lived period in your image processing, even though I've probably taken too long explaining it. You can see this terrible gradient going through my image. Last week in Photoshop, we used a tool called Gradient Exterminator, and that's a great tool, and I still use it. Just today, I had an image that I couldn't use DBE on, and I used Gradient Exterminator, and for this particular image, it worked really well. For this image, the eyes, which is this image right here, I apologize, but I forget the NGC designation. NGC something. One of my favorite tools, again in the Process Explorer, this is one of those things that's interesting about pixinsight, and I was hoping to keep this kind of a surprise because I wasn't going to show you this image, but this is the image that I've been working on. I took this Friday night, and I was trying to do a quick process, and I'm not happy with where it is yet, but I must have used the dynamic crop tool, and the dynamic crop tool is, as pixinsight calls it, a dynamic interface, I believe, and you cannot have more than one dynamic interface open in pixinsight at one time, so I had to go back and close that. That's kind of like the little thing with batch preprocessing script where you can't get out. You have to consider it a disadvantage, but I think it's one of those things you're willing to put up with. So now when I double-click Dynamic Background Extraction, I can open up Dynamic Background Extraction, or DBE as everybody calls it because we like to save time. And you click the image. It puts the crosshairs on it. At that point, Dynamic Background DBE knows what it's looking at. You can... any questions yet? And I'm going to try flipping back just to see, so my screen may go crazy.
No, we're clear on both chat and Q&A. Nobody's got any questions yet.
Okay. Back to pixinsight. So with DBE, what you're doing is, and it's funny because I've seen this in video tutorials, and they say with sample generation, which is what you do to prepare your dynamic background, they say quality over quantity. So the quality of the sample is more important than having a lot of them. And after they all go through this long routine about how you and let me actually explain what they're saying. You don't want them to be. You don't want to click a star. If you look over here, you see how the star is blacked out. Actually, I'm not sure if you can see that window, but on the dynamic background extraction, when you click a star and you click that particular sample point, you can see that it's not getting a good background. There is a problem with that particular sample point. So you don't want to click a star. You don't want to click any nebulosity in your image because if you do that, it's going to treat it as gradient and it's going to pretty much wash it out. So in that event, and if you did happen to see my iris image earlier, because of all that dark dust. I mean, the whole thing is filled with dark dust. I couldn't get any sample points that weren't dark dust, and I didn't want to get rid of that. So I ended up using that gradient exterminator on just small spots where I really knew I wanted it. But as I was saying, so you're not selecting nebulosity. You're generating samples across just the background. It hasn't been explained to me whether it has to be evenly spaced or not. But when they say quality over quantity, they always go through, and you see them placing sample spots just like I was doing here. And then sometimes they switch back and they say, but I've already generated samples previously, and it seems to me that they're all using the sample generation tool. Now, I think you could get a better result by doing it fully manually, but I've found just much, I don't know, maybe I just don't have the patience for it, but if you use a default sample radius of 20, this is on my image, samples per row, you can do anywhere between 10 and 20. If you have sparse stars, if you're using a long focal length, you might be able to get away with fewer, I believe, because then you will you won't have to go through as many with the stars, and I'll show you what I mean. When I click generate, now when other people do this and they click generate, what they're going to see is their whole screen is going to light up, because I don't think they have the same types of gradient that I have. I literally overlook a city, and maybe I'm giving myself too much credit. There are probably people in New York or Tokyo that are doing exactly what I'm doing, but I have the city on one side and I have nothing on the other, pretty much. But you see that gradient go right through it. So when some people use this default setting, they might see a lot of sample generation points pop up. But because I have such a large gradient, not a lot pop up, and I have to go to the minimum sample weight. This is one of the parameters that you use to tell it how to generate your samples. And you end up dropping this, and you may end up dropping it a lot. In pixinsight, very frequently you'll say, oh, well, I'll split it in half. Oh, I'll split it in quarters. Sometimes you have to drop it like to 1/100th of what it is, sometimes even more than that. So I'm going to quickly just hit 1 so you see what it is. It was at 0.75, I believe. And you can see at 1, it pretty much fills the field with sample generation points. There's one red, one right here. And if I click that, I can see, but I can't tell why it's red. There don't seem to be any odd things going on in that, but it has generated the samples fully across. So I want to check and make sure they're not over any nebulosity. I'm not happy with this sample here, this sample here, this sample here, that sample there, that sample there. So I'm going to delete them right out. Even this one I'm not happy with because of where it is. This one up here I'm not happy with because of where it is. This might be nah, it's not too close to a star, but that's what you want to look for, is that it's too close to a star. Occasionally I touch the model parameters tolerance, and I'm sorry to say I don't exactly understand this tool, but when I increase it, the model tends to, well, I should say, when I increase this, the gradient gets removed better. Sometimes, and very frequently, oh, I'm sorry, I just closed that quickly. Sorry. Sometimes I'll actually increase that while I'm generating the samples, and let me show you what I mean by that, because I think that this has worked for me. And I don't know if the pixinsight guys do it this way, but this has worked for me. Sometimes I'll push that tolerance all the way up to 2. And when I click that, it generates the samples fully across the field. Same way it did before. I accidentally put one right there. Ugh. Yeah, there we go. Delete, 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 delete. You can delete them going right down in a row. My mouse is getting a little clogged with some of my 3-year-old's snacks. But I go right through that, and what I have done is generated the samples the same way, but instead of changing the sample weight, I've just changed tolerance. And I think that kind of reads into the image, and Hytham probably knows this, and if he's in this conversation, he could probably tell us what it is, what exactly the reasoning is behind that, but if he's not here, we might have to ask him at a later date. So this is one of the more interesting things about what you're doing. First of all, just based off of that, you can generate a model of your background to see the gradient. And if I were to apply this to this image, you can see my background right there. I'm gonna I just used a hotkey Control A to put an auto screen stretch on it using the screen transfer function. I didn't even have to pull it up. I could just do it using an auto Control A, and I can see the gradient that it thinks is in my image. And I can look at that and look at my image. It's really light down here. It's really dark down here. There's an odd thing right there. But maybe that isn't my image, so I'm not so unhappy with that. If I'm unhappy with it, if it doesn't seem to be right, I can change a tolerance right here using the same samples because I'm happy with the samples. And I can see if it helps in any way. If I'm happy with that, then what I need to do is I need to go right back into the dynamic background extraction tool, and I need to go to this correction setting. Correction, you have two options, subtraction and division. Subtraction is for light pollution. Division is for inaccurate flat fields. The reason for this is light pollution is added into your image, whereas flat fielding has been divided by your image previously. So it's to get the math right in the image, it has to be done one way or another. To kind of get it more accurate, it has to be done one way or another. Some people will do it both ways. I've seen that done. I have, since most of my problem is light pollution, I'm primarily using subtraction, and it works really well for me. Since I have already gotten that background model, I can discard the background model. I don't usually normalize the background because I do that in the next step, and I'll show that to you. And I can choose to replace the target image, or I don't have to. I'm not going to replace it right now. What I'm just going to do is apply it, since I'm not replacing the target image. And this takes just a little bit of time. This isn't a very long process. Even with I have a fast computer, but even with a slow computer, it's not one of the really involved processes. Again, dim image, screen transfer function, but again I use Control A, and it shows me the image. Now look at that, and what I'm going to do is, one more time I'm going to say this, dynamic background extraction is a dynamic tool, so it's dynamically attached to this image, which means to get rid of this I have to close it. It's going to ask me if I want to cancel the session, because if I cancel the session, I'm out. One way around this, actually, and I didn't even say this before, and if you're processing multiple files and you want to do the same process on multiple files, and this is actually true with a lot of pixinsight's tools, you can drag this new instance button over here, and it saves the process. So it actually saves the way that dynamic background extraction was applied to this image, and you can go then and reopen it after you've closed out of this session. There you go. So that's probably the best way around using a dynamic tool. In fact, they probably would have liked me to have told you that earlier, but that is the way to get around it. So that is, I just want to make some space here. You can see this is the original image, and this is the image that's had the DBE process applied to it. The gradient's gone. I can't see it at all. It may show up a little bit in further post-processing, but for now, I'm happy with it. Are there any other questions at this point, or has anyone popped in with a question?
I don't see any questions coming in so far.
Okay.
So free to go ahead. Remember, guys, if you have any questions, just type them into chat or Q&A.
Okay. The next tool, and this is going to be a little bit of what about what I was saying about specific tools that you're going to use every time. DBE, you're almost always going to use. Almost always going to use, and I do believe you want to use DBE earlier rather than later, because gradients are going to mess up this next step. The next step is actually a two-step process, and just like everything else, it's under all processes, but it's also under color calibration. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because pixinsight has their own names for each of these tools, and sometimes there's easy ways to kind of remember the tools you need. And in color calibration, that's what we're doing now. So the first step is background neutralization, and the second step will be color calibration. So I'm going to start by opening background neutralization, and the first step is to look at your image. How many stars are there? Can you see a good piece of background sky where you can generate a good box around? And when I say box, what we're going to be doing, again, I am a hotkey guy, so I don't even remember where these things are, but what I want is a new preview. Duh. No, I don't want a new preview. Thought I did. Thought I wanted a new preview, but the hotkey for it is Alt-N, which I thought was a new preview, although I'm not 100% sure of that. And what it does is it lets me select a piece of background. I'm gonna figure that out before too long. So this lets me select a piece of background. Calls it preview 1. Now when I just selected this, and I'm actually seeing some stuff in this I don't like. There's a dim star there, and the edge of a dim star on the bottom there. So I don't like that. I'm going to delete that. With my Iris Nebula earlier, there were so many stars in the field that I couldn't find an area like this where there were no stars. This field was taken with an SCT, much smaller field of view, not nearly as many stars, and a lot easier to generate previews with. If you find that you have too many stars to do this, there's a way to use multiple previews, or you can also use the lower limit and the upper limit tools to set this background neutralization tool. That's a lot more complex. I did it for the first time this afternoon. I don't feel comfortable explaining it, because this has always worked for me previously, but it is there for you. So I have that preview, and I can look at it quickly, and I know there are no major stars in that, no major images. That preview is somewhat representative of the background throughout the sky, so I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and select that as the reference image. It's image 33._DBE, and it's the preview 1. Image 33 DBE, preview 1. We've selected that, and the next thing we're going to do is apply that to the image, again by dragging it over. This, you never really, I don't know, this never really makes a big difference visually. I'm going to undo it, and I'm going to redo it. Oh, you know what, I'm sorry. I had to do the auto stretch on it. And you can see when I link the channels and I do the auto stretch on it, I get an odd color. Unlink the channels, do the auto stretch. Why is that? Because the channels aren't, the background is neutralized, but the channels aren't calibrated. So that's what we're going to do next. And the way we do that, first I'm going to minimize this background neutralization and kind of put it up here just to get it out of the way. So next we're going to go to color calibration. I really like this tool because if it feels like your results are just more predictable. Your results seem to work out every time, and hopefully my results will work out for me this time, but we'll see. So your white reference. Your white reference in this image, this is an image of a galaxy. Since a galaxy is made up of lots and lots of stars, you can pretty much assume that if you average out all of the stars in the galaxy, you are going to get the color white. So again, I'm going to hit Alt-N, and I want to make a preview box around the entire galaxy. And I try to include as much as possible. I'm pretty sure that was preview, that Alt-N. I just don't know why that didn't work. I'll try and figure it out. Structure detection. If you don't have a galaxy in your image, you can use structure detection to have pixinsight or have the color calibration tools pick all the stars in the image and use them to calibrate the color in your image. That works well as well. That works well, but if you have a galaxy, I think they suggest using the galaxy as the image. And you can always try both and see which one works. Since I don't have many stars in this image, I'm going to say that's probably why the galaxy will work better. When you go to background reference, you're going to pick the same background reference that you used in background neutralization, which for me is image 33, preview DBE, preview 1, and then again I'm going to drag the new instance into it, and whoa, I get the dim image again, but don't worry, that's just the way the image is being displayed because the screen transfer function is hasn't been used yet. So we auto stretch it, and we get that image. And actually, this is let's see. This is before color calibration and after color calibration. And I'm not sure, something might have gone wrong there. I'm not quite sure what went wrong because it should be, I should at that point be able to link the channels. I'm going to go back and do this one more time. My apologies. Oh, okay, I see what's wrong. White reference is using the wrong image. That will do it. That'll do it every time. So like I said, and I must have, I don't know what I did, use the preview of the galaxy with structure detection off. and the background image from this image. I used an image that was off the screen in another window. Another way that it gets a little complex when you're keeping stuff together, if you have a good naming system, you can probably handle that. I don't. Kind of a seat of the pants guy, I guess. So I'm going to apply that over there. And like I said, it gets ugly again, but let's not worry yet. Apply that, and I think we're getting closer. Let's see if it did it. Yes. Okay, so you see when I applied that with the channels unlinked, it looked a lot better. But when I linked the channels, it didn't change much. And the reasoning for that is the color balance is pretty well. The color is pretty well balanced. I may not mind it so much, just the way. But remember, when I'm using the screen transfer function, this is just the way that it is displaying it on the screen. So I can go ahead and try and make the screen transfer function image prettier, but it really doesn't matter because it's just a temporary thing. Up until a specific point. What is that specific point? First of all, before I really go into that, and I don't want to go on much longer because this could go on forever. At this point, I would probably do a round of noise reduction using one of a couple different tools. They use ACDNR and TGVD noise, but to use them, you have to use a mask. We went over masks in Photoshop last week, and pixinsight, even though it's not done the same way, it does kind of revolve around using masks. And there are a couple of different types of masks, and I'm just going to show you the way to create one basic mask, because to create this mask, I actually need to use the same exact tool that I used to take this image out of the linear state and, in doing so, stretch the histogram. So, what creative name can pixinsight come up with for a tool that lets me transform the histogram? Histogram transformation. Now, the histogram transformation, again, is what stretches the image. So if I were to take that image, bring it in, use histogram transform on it, I'm taking it out of the linear state and I'm stretching the histogram. I would no longer be using the screen transfer function. I'm not doing that yet, so just keep that in mind. What I am going to do is I'm going to make a duplicate of this image by just dragging this over. Easy to duplicate an image in pixinsight. The screen transfer function, since it came from that image, is still applied to this image, and the histogram transform, when I put it in that specific mode, is seeing this image as it's opened up and showing me the histogram on this. Because I need to use a non-linear image to create the mask, I do this a specific way, and it's not necessarily the way you'd stretch your histogram, but it might be, and if you're comfortable in screen transfer function, you can do this. But since it's a mask, I'm only dealing with luminance, I'm not going to go so far into it. I can drag this new instance into the screen transfer function and put it at the bottom right there. And this is the old histogram, and this is what it's going to stretch the histogram to. Since it's a mask, I don't have to pay too much attention to that. Although, when you're using masks, whether you be removing noise or enhancing light areas, there may be points where you want your mask to clip the darks or clip the lights. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But really quickly, so I've dragged that instance of the screen transfer function into the toolbar down here. So what it's gonna do is when I drag it over, it's going to apply it to this. But I might as well show you a little bit more about the histogram transfer function. The real-time preview right here is the only way to visualize this in real time. So you can see that I've applied it. It's applying that stretch to this image. And it's not a high contrast image. So this is where, if you needed more contrast in your mask, this is where you would go about trying to get it. Now, I can drag the white slider down, or excuse me, the midpoint slider down, but since it's a mask, you can also use the black and white points and do some clipping. It really depends on how aggressive you want to be. There really isn't, as long as you know what you're doing, there really isn't a problem with being aggressive in whatever way you want. When you're happy with whatever the mask is going to look like, then you close out your preview window, drag the instance to your mask, or excuse me, the clone of your excuse me. You're going to drag that to the clone that you're using to create your mask, and then it's applied. You can to apply a mask to an image. It's really easy. You drag the little thing, the little tab right there, to the edge of the image right here, and drop it on there. You can't close this because it's being used, but you can put it aside. Right now, the mask is being shown on the image. You can toggle between the mask so that it's not shown, it's still applied up here. You can disable it by clicking enable or disable. Actually, enable, I think it always shows enable. You can invert it. Now it's inverted. So let me see. So right now, the red is covering the sky, and the white is revealing the galaxy. If I were to do a noise reduction on this, I'd probably do it that way, where I'm actually not sure. I don't think I stretched my mask enough, but either way, if I were to do noise reduction, I would want the sky background to the sky to be revealed and the galaxy to be covered with the red. And actually, I believe pixinsight lets you choose the color that you use for your mask. I was hoping they'd let me use black and white. I don't know how that works, but either way. So I have a mask applied to this, and I would go in and apply my noise reduction. I am not going to do that right now because noise reduction in pixinsight could get its own hour-long video, and there just really isn't enough time. And I'm already coming up on an hour, and there's a couple other things I want to show you because I haven't really explained the histogram transfer function. So I'm going to jump right out of there. You had seen in Hytham's previous video the way to make a great star mask. That's another great tool that if you go into Hytham's dark dust tutorial, he shows a really in-depth way of making a star mask. What I've done here is I've made somewhat of a luminance mask. Using either type of mask, you can do a lot more selective editing. Last week you saw me in Photoshop using masks basically. It really is the same thing, just different method. So I'm back to my image that has the screen transfer function applied to it. This histogram transformation is still storing the settings that I applied to that clone, so I'm going to reset it by clicking that button down there. Remember earlier I said you can spend a lot of time making it pretty in screen transfer function, but it doesn't really matter because you're probably going to dump it anyway. At this point, you can close out screen transfer function. If those previews are getting in the way, you can hide them by clicking show previews, and you can bring up your histogram real-time preview, and you can stretch your histogram. One of the really nice things about pixinsight is it tells you how much of the shadows and highlights you're clipping by percentage. And sometimes, like, you'll start going and it'll say, well, actually, with my midpoint slider, I won't be clipping anything. If I were to bring my black slider down, you'll see, like, 14 pixels are being clipped out of, I don't know, 9 million or something like that, 0.002% of the image. So you can see it really gives you a good idea as to what it can do. I just jumped a bunch, and it's not even clipping any pixels. So those are probably dead pixels or pixels that aren't responding really well. And you can see just by applying that single stretch to it, I can start to bring out the detail. Now, it was this tool that confused me about whether you should apply individual small stretches to an image or not. I've read, and I believe it was it was either on the pixinsight forum or in pixinsight literature, that you should use fewer histogram transformation iterations. Hytham said he uses more. I don't know if it matters, and I don't know if I've seen a difference. But again, I think, actually, I shouldn't say that. I have seen a difference. I took it to the extreme, and I tried to do it in one transform. I thought, well, you know what? If they say do it in as few as possible, sure, it's possible to do it in one. But I'm not sure that gave me the best results. And I know it didn't, because look at this. Well, one of the important things to remember is with pixinsight, you can always zoom in on specific areas of the histogram. So if you need to do tight details like this, you can do tight details like this. But still, I feel like I want to do another iteration. So I can, if I like that right there, I can apply it to that image. Now this has taken this image out of the linear state for the first time. You want your color calibration, your initial gradient removal done by this point. You might even choose to saturate a little bit before this point. I've actually done that with good results previously. But you're pretty much, you're over the hump of certain tools. At this point, there are a lot of pixinsight tools that won't work for you. So what you want to do, then, we're going to apply another histogram transformation function instance, and oh, again, I need to have the preview open, and looks like what I'm going to want to do is bring the black point way down again, and this is where I'm starting to clip some pixels. I just have to choose. I'm getting a little hasty there. Just have to choose how many I'm willing to clip, and usually that just depends on how far I want to bring out the galaxy. Now I said earlier in this isn't the best data, and maybe I apologize if it's been boring looking at this data, but I always see people working on this great data. They don't have light pollution gradients. They don't have the same issues that I have. So maybe someone will be able to learn something from this. And as with subpar data, sometimes you have to settle for not the best results. I don't know when I'm this image, for example, the eyes. I didn't know when I started what kind of results I could expect, I think I'm not going to say it was a little bit too much for my light pollution. If I were to be processing this for myself, I would have, after combining the RGB, I would have extracted a luminance layer. And to that luminance layer, what I would have done is I would have tried to brighten up these outer arms just a little bit. I didn't have time to do any of that today, and I knew I wasn't going to have time, so I didn't want to go into that. But at this point, I brought the image out of its linear state, and just using the histogram transformation function, a little bit more noise has appeared. I can go in and do more noise reduction with a couple tools that I'm not going to have time to demonstrate tonight. But what I could do is I could pull that down, just try and get a little bit more contrast out of it. I'm going to apply. You can click that just to apply to the image back there. I usually like seeing the image as it's applied, just in case something happens that I don't notice. And again, not the best results in the world, but this was taken from a red zone. This was a target that I didn't really expect much out of, and didn't really get much out of it. At least you see it. Like I said, I would earlier go in and try and extract a luminance layer to give me a little bit more glow around the galaxy. And the other tool that I would use would be on the color layers, or excuse me, on the RGB channels. I would use color saturation to boost my galaxy and star color, so that when I apply my luminance, it'll keep them balanced. And as you see, as I bring this color saturation up, it really does wonders for the image. Really makes the red dust lanes in the galaxy pop out. Now, you saw another instance apply that to it. That's because these, after it applies to the image, if you have the preview still open, it applies it a second time to the preview. That always gets confusing, but that's why occasionally I close the preview and apply it to the image. You can see I got a little bit more color out of it. If I would apply a luminance to this and even do some deconvolution in the luminance, I'd probably get a lot more detail. But I'm going to, for the sake of time, I do want to stop there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask if there are any questions.
There aren't any questions sitting in the Q&A and the chat, but unless, yeah, I think we've got 5 people here, including yourself, and if you finished your formal part of the presentation, it might be appropriate for us to go ahead and open the microphones.
That is fine with me.
Okay, so let's see. Do I do that here? Point?
I can do it as well. Yes, both of us.
Okay. Unmute. Tim. Okay, now we all should be in here. We can all chip in as we need to. I wanted to thank you for doing that. I've worked my way through pixinsight and gotten into it. How many of us are in fact using pixinsight? Tim, are you?
No.
And Josh?
No, I'm not using it yet.
And you would be Eric? Eric.
Yeah, I tried it, and I was about ready to go stick a gun in my mouth.
You know, it can get frustrating. I sat down with Warren Keller for about 4 or 5 hours once, and actually several times with Warren. He's a good guy, and he sent me off a bunch of stuff. How do I share a screen? Where do I share a screen here?
Just
You said a green arrow on your left.
You guys are all looking at my screen still, right?
Yeah. Well, it depends. We can choose which ones we're looking at by just clicking on various people as to. But I want to share my screen. Google Drive. I've called my pixinsight up. One of the things that Adam just showed us was that he could. It's Adam, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What just showed us is how to make a new instance. Well, when you make a new instance, you know, he was going through a workflow where first I do this, then I do that, then I do that, then I do that. Okay, how do I share a screen here, Coach?
Click over on the left. If you click, oh, you know what? I have to give you
permission to do that. Okay.
You have control.
There's a green arrow or a green box.
Click the green arrow, screen share.
Okay, screen share, pixinsight. Okay. Now, instead of my face, you should be able to see my pixinsight screen. Okay, I want you to take a look over here. I want you to take a look over here. These are called new instance icons, and they really helped me get through pixinsight, get into pixinsight. Remember, the first thing you want to do after you open your image is probably take a look at it. So you click on STF, and it brings up the screen transfer function, and then you can do things. The next thing you probably want to do with a given image is you want to crop out the outside. So this is a chronological list of a lot of the standard things you'd go through. And dynamic background extraction, this is automatic and this is dynamic. If you wanted to go to automatic background extraction, you click on that. Let me get rid of some of these others here. And it actually has some suggested tolerances and stuff like that, so you can go ahead and see. And in other words, all of the assumptions and defaults, these are no longer the pixinsight defaults. These are the defaults that Warren says are applicable in a lot of the stuff he does. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying is that where Adam showed us how to make a new instance icon, if you find something that works, you make it up, you call it a new instance icon, give it a name, and then put it in order over here. You can actually make your own workflow over here, and it really substantially eases how you do things. Okay, or you can get this whole set by going over to Warren and buying something from him, I think, and that's or attending some of his workshops and stuff like that. So that helps a lot. That helped me a lot, anyway. Okay, so I'm going to give that up. Anybody have any questions about that?
No.
Okay.
No, that's actually a great point, that you can put your whole workflow there. I haven't even gotten around to doing that, but I've seen a few tutorials where people had a nice workflow lineup, and that's kind of one of the things I like about pixinsight is that it does kind of require you to go through a specific workflow, which feels a little bit better, just because it's like a set of instructions. If you kind of know what you're doing and you have that particular workflow, you get more comfortable as you go. I'm growing to like pixinsight a lot. I just figured out TGV denoise, which is really, when it comes to noise reduction, it's really, really, really effective. But until you really figure out what really the specific setting you need to use is, it can be really difficult. And I'm not going to try and explain it now, but like I said earlier, you could explain noise reduction in pixinsight for an hour, but it's basically edge protection, and you keep dropping the exponents of the edge protection in pixinsight until it works. But noise reduction, pixinsight does a lot of stuff really well. Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to point out, and I actually intended to do this earlier in the session. Sergey recorded a few tutorials, and we posted them on the Google Plus page. And he did some tutorials on Hasta la Vista Green in Photoshop. He did a tutorial on, I want to pull them up.
Nebulosity.
Nebulosity. Oh yeah, Gradient Exterminator in Photoshop. Yeah, he did a Nebulosity tutorial, and then Hasta la Vista Green and Gradient Exterminator in Photoshop. And they're worth checking out. I've been up at my lake house for the weekend, and I didn't have any time to really do anything until about an hour and a half ago. So I got them posted, and that was about it. I didn't even get to look at them. But anyone else have any questions, comments?
Adam, what processing software did you use before you moved over to pixinsight?
I used Photoshop.
Just solely Photoshop?
Deep Sky Stacker into Photoshop, yes.
I still hear a lot of people talking about how happy they are when they switch, and I see there's a couple powerful tools, but it feels like a lot of the other tools are pretty similar to Photoshop. I mean, would you agree with that, or?
I don't disagree with that. I think Photoshop does a lot of the basic stuff better. Even the color calibration you can do in Photoshop, like just by clicking the droppers. What I really would like to do is I want to read into the importance of keeping your data linear, because that's the emphasis that pixinsight puts on everything, and I just don't quite understand what the benefit is.
I could for scientific purposes, I suppose, for sure, but I don't know about making pretty images.
No, I understand that, and that's kind of the point. Now, I will say this: if you understand a lot about pixinsight, you can make magic happen.
Yeah.
The same is probably true with Photoshop, but I think on Astro images, pixinsight would probably just do a little bit better right across the board at everything.
Could I say that one of the great things you have to remember about linear data versus stretched, etc. data is that everything you do to an Astro image destroys data. And the longer you can keep it in an unstretched form, linear, the more pure it is, the more you can go back and change things, correct things, and without doing it. But once you've applied it, like you do in Photoshop, you've lost the data. You can't reconstruct it.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the emphasis they've put on it. And I don't know, can you finesse it in Photoshop, or can you finesse it in Photoshop? In other words,
look, there at NEAF last year, Neil Fleming and somebody else had a workshop where they sat there all evening. One of them, same set of data, one of them using Photoshop and the other one using pixinsight to get an image. And at the end of it, the argument was still there, which is better. There's not going to be an end to that argument any more than, there's a whole lot of differences of opinion. My opinion is that they both have steep learning curves, but for most of us, we've been through the Photoshop learning curve, so it doesn't seem so steep. Whereas we haven't yet been through the pixinsight. I also think that the pixinsight guys take pride in a nerdiness, and they don't try to have a consumer product. They try to have a product that takes pride in being an engineer's product or a mathematician's product, and that leaves many of us behind. It's just obtuse. However, there is nothing in Photoshop that I've seen that can, even with Gradient Exterminator, that can really match the dynamic background extraction or the automatic background extraction. Everybody I've talked to says that when you're combining the images, what Adam started off with today, the calibration and stacking, that it does as good or better than anybody, that it opens it opens the files cleaner and better and stuff like that. Also, I think that an awful lot of people I've talked to and heard about it on this issue, they say that they always go over to Photoshop at the end to finish it off. Now, that may not be true of everybody, but almost everybody goes over to Photoshop and makes that last few tweaks. So I don't think there is one answer. If the question is which is better, I don't know. pixinsight for an Astro image is more powerful.
Well, I think a lot of times people ask what's better. I think that's the wrong question to ask. It's what can you what tools are you getting, and what works better in which program or is easier. And I've certainly heard over and over about dynamic background extraction and how great that'll be. So I mean, I bought it. I'm going to use it at some point. I was just curious, when people go through workflows, it sounds like Mad Ratter goes through a workflow, and he might have specific things he does in one program, and then another, and then another. And so, I mean, if ideally, it might be nice at some point in these tutorials if we have, somebody dancing around between the different programs and doing a full process, where they show where they found the tools to be the most powerful from which software they use.
That's not going to happen in an hour show.
That was my intent, but I realize it's not going to happen in an hour show.
No.
Unfortunately, because it would be very helpful.
Yeah.
But
speaking of the workflows, do they change from image to image? I mean, the way you're going to do something, do you have a set way? This step, this step, this step, this step, or do they change?
In pixinsight, my workflow is fairly consistent. Especially, I mean, I always do. I almost always do DBE. Well, I should say, I almost always RGB combine. Then I do DBE. Then at that point, I might extract my luminance channel. Then I'll do color background neutralization, color calibration. But for the most part, my linear state workflow is pretty similar. One of the things about pixinsight is all the tools are so difficult that you're probably inclined to stick to the same routine because it's difficult to move out to a different routine, try a new tool, and you get bad results, and you choose not to use it again. But for the most part, my routine in pixinsight is pretty stable. In Photoshop, it was a little bit more dependent on the specific image, I'd say. Although I guess the same as pixinsight. I did an iris nebula that I couldn't use DBE on because of all the nebulosity. And I brought it into Photoshop, Gradient Exterminator, took care of it. So there are always specific things in specific images, but I like to think my workflow is kind of stable.
I'd second that. For any given type of image, if I'm going to take a CCD image of a deep space object, it's going to be 95% the same one after the other. You know, the steps in processing it, they're going to be pretty much the same.
Okay.
And again, to go back to what I showed you a little bit earlier, it is that Warren's chronological list of new instance icons is what guides me through it. Now, there's some I could skip and others I can't, you know, stuff like that. I usually process my luminance as nice and clean and sharp and everything as it can be, and corrected histogram transformation and everything, and I do the same thing with RGB. Then I go ahead and combine them and tweak as necessary, which is now Adam was just doing an RGB, not a luminance RGB. So things may have been different, or maybe he hadn't gotten to the stage of mentioning that there was a luminance someplace lurking in the background.
No, actually, because of my light pollution, this is something I realized shortly after I got my monochromatic camera. My light pollution gradient is terrible when I use the luminance filter. So I always extract my luminance channel from my red-green, from my RGBs, just because then I get the advantage of the gap in the light pollution gap in the RGB filters. Otherwise, if I took a luminance image, the gradients don't line up so well, and for some reason I've just never had luck with it. And even worse than that, dust donuts, I've had trouble even calibrating dust donuts because I feel like the light pollution, there's just too much of it, it's not even, and I just can't get rid of them fully. For whatever reason or not, I've had better luck extracting the RGB channel, or extracting the luminance from the RGB.
One thing also that might be nice at some point is doing a workflow where people remove the stars and can process the image and then replace the stars. I know it's similar to masking them off, but I still think that there's enough of a difference there. It allows you to process quite a bit differently. I don't know. It doesn't seem like very many people do that, at least in the beginning and intermediate threads or forums. Do you guys do that at all?
I haven't used that technique at all. I've seen it used. I tried it maybe once a long time ago. I'm trying to think. I don't remember where I even tried it from, but I've seen it done, and it's pretty impressive with stars removed from a great nebula image like the Orion Nebula. I've never even. I'm not going to say I haven't thought of it, but I tried it once and didn't have as much luck with it as I would have hoped, or maybe I didn't have the best data. But
no, I've struggled. I've tried several times too. That's why I was asking. I think that you can still put the stars back in. I think it makes the data a lot easier to process, and then you put the stars back in at the end. I was just curious if you guys had done that. That might be an interesting topic if anybody is skilled at doing that to bring up.
Yeah, if we don't get an immediate, we're still going to be looking for a presenter for next week or something like that. I'll try and do some fishing for someone. I'm trying to use Google Plus as a forum without going into Cloudy Nights so much with this, because I don't want to like make an issue out of it or anything, but they are. I think there's some internal deliberation over what we're doing here is considered member poaching on Cloudy Nights, and another person had a post removed for doing something like this, and I just don't want to. I don't want to push anyone on Cloudy Nights. I mean, if maybe I understand because I'm in business or something like that, but if you're business or if you're out there to get as many members as possible and we're taking 5 or 6 or 7 away for the next couple hours, then I understand. And they didn't make an issue of it, but it was pointed out to me that another's post was removed, and I just said, okay, I'll tread lightly, at least until I see that post pop back in or something like that, or they review it or whatever may happen. If they set up a Google Plus page, if Cloudy Night set up a Google Plus page and had a video hangout or something like that, I'd be glad to jump right in there and do it on their behalf. But for now, I just don't want to. I don't want to push them. So.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Well, I will offer, if you guys don't end up getting one, I can do that M42 HDR processing. That one, I already have a video I made up for it and everything, so I can kind of just go along with that video.
Oh, that'll be great. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, that's another one where I tread a little lightly because I got a lot of that. Most of the processing technique from Anna Morris. I don't know if you know who she is. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I used a similar processing technique to that, but no reason to do anything different. It works so well. So.
Anna Morris, it's funny. She like came into the Cloudy Nights Beginners Forum one day and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about trying astrophotography. I think she has a CPC 800. I want to say because I had a CPC 800 at the time, and I want to say I told her some advantages and disadvantages. Then she like posts her first image, and it's unbelievable. And like I'm like thinking, what am I doing wrong? Oh my God! And then she posts her second image and her third image, and like I don't know. Some people are natural talents.
Yeah, everything you look at or everything she touches turns to gold. You're like,
exactly,
oh, man.
Exactly, the Midas touch.
Yeah. All right, well, yeah, let me know if you don't get somebody else. I can plan on putting that together.
Absolutely. Well, plan on it for now because we're going to continue to need more people, and even if I may reach out to like someone like Scott Rosen or somebody and just ask if they have any interest, get them familiar, and see what we could set up. Otherwise, we'll have to come up with some other type of format.
Cool.
I can again pitch in, but I've got a pretty heavy, nasty load for about 2 months.
Okay.
What would you think of? So far, we've just been processing. I've got several presentations presented by PowerPoints. Can we run a PowerPoint on something like this and we talk?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I think that should work.
I've got one that I gave at Riverside Astro Imaging Workshop a couple of years back about what makes a good astro image. When you make an astro image, what should you be looking for? You know, like what questions do you ask? Is this a good image or is this not a good image? Well, I don't know. What what questions do you ask about it? What do you look for in an image? If that's the kind of thing we could use, I can do that because it's already been done.
Yeah, I think that'd work. I mean, we're going to be we're going to be attracting people at all different levels, so I think the more content we get out there of different variety is going to be best. Another thing I wanted to mention is people are watching us on YouTube. I mean, it may seem minimal, but we have to remember we're astrophotographers, first of all, so our audience is very small, but I think people have watched close to 3,000 minutes worth of the videos, and that doesn't include our live sessions going on here. So I thought that was pretty good, even though our videos are...
You mean people have chosen to watch? What's that number mean? And do we know they're real? Are they spiders or crawling the web looking for?
No, they're real people. This is on YouTube's analytics page, so it tells me which videos people are watching. And
can you tell how long they've watched any given video?
Yes, we're between 10 minutes on average.
Well, that's pretty good.
Which I think is pretty good. If you were to tell someone 10 minutes, it's an hour-long video, they might say, oh, but retaining an audience for 10 minutes on the internet is amazing.
Well, no, it's not that. Remember, I went over there just to see what these things looked like, and if somebody spent an hour and I spent 13 seconds saying, okay, that's what it sounds like and looks like over here, then we've got 30 minutes average.
Exactly.
So we don't know. I mean, it may be that 50 people have spent the whole 60 minutes, or it may be that 2,000 people have spent 15 seconds on it, and other people. Okay,
yep.
We don't know exactly yet.
Yeah, but it doesn't include the live broadcast people, so they're...
Now, are any of those people? Are there people watching that we can't see at the bottom of the screen right now?
Not live, but after the fact, yes. Yeah, okay. We have all of these are uploaded directly to YouTube, so you can go to YouTube and watch these videos, and you can Google to these videos.
Okay.
There are not people that we can't see at the bottom who are in the Q&A who watch this. I was confused about.
There are. See, I can't see who's over there. But all I get is.
Yeah, I noticed through the whole night that I didn't see anybody in Q&A.
Yeah, I got a completely blank Q&A.
Yep. You can't even. You still cannot even ask a question.
Yeah.
I know.
Must be clear skies everywhere tonight.
Yeah. I hope it's not a bug, because I can't. Q&A is different for me as well than it was last week, it seems.
Well, is it a bug, or is it because we're in here that we can't be out there?
I thought I posted something in Q&A a couple weeks ago.
I did too.
Yeah, but you can click on chat, and you can go into chat then and ask a question. And I thought you were able to go to Q&A too, and then ask there.
And we could originally, but my question is: are there people out there? Are there people out there that have been posting in Q&A, and for some reason we're not seeing them?
If there are, I apologize. I didn't notice how many viewers we had on. We still appear to have 0 viewers. I didn't notice how many popped in or out. But right now there don't appear to be anybody in Q&A. I'll see if I can get those questions on a different page. Hopefully there weren't. Hopefully nobody's question went unanswered.
Okay, is it time to go off and get my stuff out of the car? I took all my camera and stuff out to the observatory in the desert last night. So.
I'm coming back. I'm coming back home, so all my stuff's in the car, and I'm gonna.
Yeah, I
might do it tomorrow morning. I don't know if I feel like doing it tonight. It's not clear. But it's time to wrap it up, guys. So.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah. Appreciate it. We'll see you.